Hello and welcome to the sixth and currently final part of the build system tutorial series. In this video, we're going to be working on being able to save and load our beautiful bases that we're making. As a prerequisite to this video, I would highly recommend watching this video on screen now, which I'll link in the description below and in a card up at the top. I'm going to be retreading some of the stuff that I cover in that video, so I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time on the kind of how to save data out of Unity, because I cover that in that video. What I will be doing is using the stuff that we learn in that video to custom tailor it to our specific version of a save system that we need for our project. So with that said, let's just jump straight into doing this. So I'm going to go over to our test sort of scene here. I'm going to collapse these down. I'm going to right click, create a new empty, and I'm going to call this our base manager. And drag this up to the top and put our base manager up at the top. And I'm going to come out of debug mode, normal mode, and I'm just going to zero this out. And then I'm going to come over to the script folder, our build system scripts, and I'm going to right click, create a new C# script, and we'll call this our base manager. I'm going to drag this onto our empty. We have to let that reload file, and then we can drag this on over to our empty. So we've got our base manager script here, and let's open that up. Our empty. So what we're going to do here is we want a method called private void load base. This is going to take in a class, which we're going to make in a second, called save data. And then we are going to do some stuff with that class. So let's go back to Unity and make the scripts that we need for our save load system. And I'm going to put these in a new folder called save load. We'll open this up. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to right click, create a new script. We're going to call this just save load. Open this. So again, this is going to be not a mono behavior. This is just going to be a public static class called save load. And we don't need this stuff here. So again, this is what we've already created in that video, which I mentioned at the start. So I'm just going to type this up as we go. I'd highly recommend watching that video. But the first thing we need is a Unity public static Unity action called onSaveGame. And to use this Unity action, we need to be using Unity engine.events up here at the top. We've got onSaveGame, and then we are going to have another action called public static Unity action. This is going to take in our save data class, which we get to make again. And we could do on load game. So let's just go back to our project and let's create that save data script we've now used in a couple of places. And that should solve those compilation issues. We'll go back over to our script. So we've got our save data class. And then I'm going to have a public static string called directory. And I'm going to set this equal to a new folder called save data. And then we can have a public static string. I'll call this file name, and I'm going to set this equal to save game .sav for save. Okay, so first thing we want to do is to have a okay, so next we need a method which we can call to actually save the game. So let's make a public static save function, which is going to take in a piece of save data, which we call data. So public static void, and I'm just going to call that save, not save data, just so we don't get confused as to what we're talking about. So in our save game function, we can call our onSaveGame event if anyone's listening, just in case we want to do anything with that. We might want to pause the player while the game saves, or show a screen or something like that. So we can just put that there. We won't be using it for our purposes, but that's there if you do want to use it for your project. And then we can make a string, which we're going to call directory, which is equal to application.persistentDataPath plus our directory. Then we can check if the directory, which is in system.io, so you'll need to be using system.io, we can check whether that directory exists. And if it doesn't, let's just make it. So directory.create directory. And again, in our directory. So this is going to be in our app data folder on Windows, and then it's going to add this directory onto it. If it doesn't exist, it'll create it, and if it does exist, then it's already there. We don't need to do anything with that. Now we're going to make a new string, which we can just call JSON, and this is going to use the Json Utility, and we can call the toJSON function, pass in our data, which is our save data, and we can pass in true for pretty print, which just organizes the JSON file a bit nicer. It formats it nicely so you can read it. Then we can call file.write all text, pass in to the path our directory plus our file name. And for the contents, we can pass in JSON string. And then I'm going to just debug.log just so we can see this saving game. So let's now go over to this save data method. Let's go over now to this save data class. See here. So this is just a data class. It doesn't need to inherit from mono behavior. It doesn't need starter update. And can mark this as system.serializable. So this means that we can write this data out to a file. We don't need these statements here. So here, we're just going to have a public list, which actually we will need to reference system.collections.generic. So we're going to have a public list of building save data, which again is a class that we're going to make. We're just going to call this our building save data. And we want to make a constructor for this. So public save data. And we're going to set building save data equal to a new list of building data. Okay, so now let's go over to our building script, building.cs. So in here, outside of our class, so below very last curly brace, we're going to make a new class. Again, is going to be system.serializable. It's going to be a public class called building save. And in here, we're going to have a string, so public string for our building name, a public building data, our assigned data, a public vector 3 for our position, and a public quaternion for our rotation. Then we need to make a constructor for this, so public building save data string, and this is going to take in a building name, take in some building data, which we call assigned data. It'll take in vector 3 position and a quaternion, which we'll call rotation. We need to set building name equal to building name assigned data equal data, position equal to position, rotation equal to rotation. So that's our building save data class made. So now we need a place to actually store all of the save data from our base. So we can go back over to our save load folder, and we're going to make a new script called the save game manager, which again, let's open that up. This is going to have a reference to some public static save data. I'm just going to call data. In our awake function, we're going to subscribe to the save load onload game function or event. Sorry, we're going to make a method called data, which will take in some save data. And then we're going to make a. Then because this doesn't have any data sort of assigned to it, it's a at the minute, we can say data equal to new save data, which again, in our constructor, it's just going to make a new list of building save data. So when we load some data, what we want to do is overwrite the data that we've made here with the save data that we've just passed in. So when we load up the data, we're going to put it into our save game manager, and then anything that needs to access the current save game, current save file, it can come to the save game manager to get the reference to save data. And we make this static. So here we need a method that our save and load button can call to do the kind of function that it needs to do. So I'm going to make a public static void, and we can do try load data. And that's just going to call load from our save load script, which we haven't actually implemented yet. We've just done saving. So let's just put that in. So load is just going to be a public static load method, public static void load. And we need to get our full path. So we can do string full path is equal to the application dot persistent data path plus our directory plus our file name. This is where our save file lives on our hard drive. And we're going to make a variable called save data, which we can set equal to a new piece of save data. And then if we find something at this path, we can set this variable to the save data that we found. And if we haven't found anything, we're just going to pass back an empty save file. So here we say if file.exists at the full path. So if we have a save file there, we're going to do string JSON is equal to file.read all text at the full path. So it's going to read our save file, put it back into the JSON string. Then we're going to convert that back into we're going to convert that back to our save data class. So data equals Json Utility dot from JSON, reading that JSON file back into the save data class. So if we find a save file at our full path, we're going to read that save file and then convert it back into a sort of save game file piece of save data. And we can call on load game poke, and we can pack back in that data. I'm just going to put an else, and then we can debug.log that the save file does. So back over to our save game manager, we can now make a button that tries to load the data, and all that does is call our load function over on save load. If that exists, this onload game event will be called, which we subscribe to here. So load data will be called, and then we copy our save data into this data variable. We also want to call on destroy and copy and paste this down here. And then we can just do minus equals to unsubscribe. And similarly, we need a save data method. We need a method to be able to save our game. Do private void, private static void save data. This is going to make a copy of our save data. Then we're going to call save load.save, sync in our save data, and we can debug.log that. So let's go back over to Unity and see where we are with this. So let's go to our canvas, and to the canvas, I'm going to add our save game manager. Got that here, save game manager. underneath our canvas in side panel top, I'm just going to copy these buttons here. So corridor button, I'll just press Control D, and we'll duplicate them. And this one, let's say save base. And this one, we can do load base. Save button. And on our save button, drag in our canvas, go to the save game manager and call public static save data method. I'd put it as private, it needs to be public. So got our canvas dragged in there. We can do save game manager, save data. And for the load button, we drag in our canvas again. This time we try load data. But at the minute, we aren't actually getting any data saving out because none of our buildings are generating their own data. But if we click play and we come up, I think we can click save base and we see save key is being pressed and saving game. Obviously that's called before the debug.log to say the save key is pressed. That's why that's first. Then we can also do load base, which doesn't currently work. Sorry, it does work. It's just I was expecting a debug.log for which we haven't actually implemented. So we can put that there and we can say loading save. So let's go back over to our project and just double check that that's working. So we press play and we can click load base and there we go, loading save. And that's because it's found our save file, which if you're on Windows, you can do, if you type in run and load up the run here, we can do app data in percentage signs. That takes us to the app data roaming folder. What we need to do is we can go back one and go to local low. And here we've got default company and I've got building tutorial series and save data, which is the folder. And then we've got our save game here. That default company comes from where it says company name and product name. That's where default company build tutorial series came from here. If you had, your own games company name filled in, then it'd be local low, your games company, project name, save data, and then we've got this save file, which is just a text file. We can open this with, Notepad, for example. So here you can see our array, which is currently empty. So that's what we're going to work on now. So let's get that filled with some actual pieces of data. So in our building.cs script, when we place a building, we want to generate a piece of data that says that that building is there, that that's a building. We want to generate a piece of data that lets our base manager know that there should be a building there to load when we call load base. So let's go to building. And at the bottom of our place building function, we can actually, we need to just go up to the top and let's make a private building save data called save data, just so we can store a reference to this. And we just want to say here, underneath all of the code in our place building method, we can do save data equals new building save data, and we can pass in our game object.name, which we've just set here. We can pass in our assigned data. We can pass in our transform.position and our transform.rotation. And then we want to say if, we want to check whether our save game manager doesn't already include a reference to this building, because if it does, we don't want to add it to the list, otherwise we'll have overlapping, conflicting data. So what we're going to say here is if the save game manager doesn't, in the building, what we're going to do is we're going to go to the save game manager, to the save data, and we're going to get this list of building save data, and we're going to see whether it contains this piece of data that we've just made. And if it doesn't, which it shouldn't, but this is just a good way of checking, just in case anything's gone wrong, we could do save game manager dot data dot building save data, which is the list. We can add our own save data to it. So we're making here a new piece of data for this specific building. So we place down a corridor. This will be corridor plus, and then it'll have its position. That'll be the game object name. The assigned data will be the corridor piece, and we're storing a reference to its position, transform.rotation. We're going to check whether over on our save game manager, we have our data, which is our save data. We're going to check whether this list of building save data contains some data that we've just made, which it shouldn't do because we've just created that class. But this is just to be safe. Then we're going to access the save data and we're going to add a reference to ourselves to that. So now, if we go back to Unity and we hit play, and we get some base parts and we place them down around, and we press escape. Let's go into our menu and let's hit save base. So saving game, save key has been pressed. So now let's go back to that folder. And if you're on Mac or Linux, you'll have to look up Unity application.persistent data path, and that'll point you in the right direction as to where yours is. Again, on Windows, it's in app data, local low, the name of your project, company, and project name, full tutorial, save data, save game. So now we can see that we've got our building square at 11, 0, and -8. 8, 0, -17, -2, 0, 23. So these are all of the buildings that we've put down just then that we've now saved out. So now when we load the game, our building manager, or base manager, sorry, is going to know exactly which building should go where. Now, just as a side note, with our assigned data, we're setting this through the inspector and it's coming up with this instance ID. When you build, so these instance IDs are kind of assigned by Unity against our building data. So, but these can vary in between the editor and scene changes and also the built version of the game. Just be aware of that. If you save a game in the editor and then load it up in a built version of the game, they may or may not load correctly. You want them to load. Ideally, what you'd need to do, and it's beyond the scope of this kind of project, is have a database which contains a reference to this assigned data, which you can get by something that won't change. So, for example, int ID. If that's not making any sense, I'll have a link to this video. This is from the inventory tutorial series, but it goes over how to create an item database to kind of solve this issue. What I didn't want to do is kind of repeat information that's already out there, kind of extend this series longer than it needs to go. This works, but just make sure that, but just know that if you run into any issues with a save game in the built version of the game not loading in the project, that's probably why. So that's just a little bit of an aside as to what these instance IDs are doing. But for our purposes, it should work fine. So if anyone does really struggle with that, let me know and I can make it I can do a follow-up video to explain specifically how we could do it for our project. But watching the video that I've just shown on screen and that's in the description, you should be able to figure it out. You should be able to kind of work that out and do it yourself, which is always a great feeling, I think. But for now, let's just jump back over into our base manager script. So we are over here in base manager and we made this private void method called load base. So what we want to do is in an onEnable function, when the save load system invokes the onLoad game event, we want to subscribe load base to that event. And on disable, as usual, we need to unsubscribe from that event. So on save load on load game minus equals load base. So now we already know how to place buildings down, new buildings, and sort of spawn them into the world. We're doing it on our build tool.cs script. We're doing it here. So we're making a new game object, we're adding a building component, we're initializing it, we're setting its rotation, and then we call place building when we click the left mouse button. So we need to do some of that again. So let's just copy this over to our base manager and we can paste it in. But we need to wrap this in another for each loop. So we're going to say for each, and we'll say for each building in our data dot building save data, which is that list of all of our buildings that we've saved out. Then we copy this in to here. And for the name, we can just set that to building.name, so the building name. For the layer, we're setting that through code. We're setting that in the inspector, this default layer int, and we could either hard code it, or on our base manager we could just make a public int called default layer int, and then that solves that issue. And now here in spawned building, let's store that in a local variable. Over on the build tool, that was a global variable, so that's why that didn't work. And what we want to do is we want to do all of this the same. We're going to initialize the spawned building, and we're going to pass in our data dot. Sorry, we're going to pass in our building assigned data. We're going to set the rotation to the building dot rotation, and we can set the position to building dot position. Remember, this building is our building save data. So building name, assigned data, position, rotation. That's what we are doing here. Building is a piece of save data, and we're accessing those fields to initialize our building. And then once we've spawned this game object into the world, we can do build component. We can say spawned building dot place building. And we jump over to build tutorial series. So we go back into our project now, and unless I've missed something, that should theoretically work. So we're going to come over here, and we've already got a bit of save data actually. So we can press escape, tab, sorry, to get up our base, and then we can click load base, and you can see that we've had a slight issue. It spawned in 1, but then there was an error. So let's just double check what this error was. Okay, so I'm not sure why that wasn't working. I haven't done anything apart from I restarted the project. And now you can see that if we press tab and load base, it loads in properly and is even storing our rotated buildings. And we could go over here and let's spawn in this corridor and spawn in another one. Let's save our base, exit, replay, hit load, and our base is loaded, including the 2 new pieces that we put down there. So if you run into an error where you can't access when you try and load, you get an error, just restart your project. Hopefully that will solve it. It works for me. If it doesn't work for you, let me know below, and I can try and do a bit more investigation. Okay, so with that working, let's now make a onDestroy function. And what we want to do is similar to what we're doing in our place building. We're just going to copy this line and paste it down here. So we're saying, and get rid of the exclamation mark. So if the save game manager does contain our save data, then we need to remove it from our save data, because obviously the game object has been destroyed. So we let the save game file know that we're no longer there, and we can remove our save data from it. And another thing we may want to do is here in our init function, I'm just going to make a new parameter of build save data, and we'll call this save data, and I'm going to set it equal to null, just so we don't have to change any of our other methods. We're just going to give it a default value of null. And then down here we can say if save data is not equal to null, then let's set our save data to this. So if we pass it, when we initialize it, we can pass in a piece of save data, and if we have, we just set it to this private variable here. So, and again in place building, we can just check to see if save data equals null, then let's make a new piece of save data. And we're also going to check if it's contained here, then we can, if it's not contained in our save game, we can add it to our save game. So again, let's go back over to Unity and hit play. Place a corridor down. So we can now save our game. So save base. Let's exit out of the game, go back into the game, load our base. So there is our base that we've just loaded. We can delete some pieces from here. We can save our base, exit the game, hit play, and we'll load our base back up. Okay, so we had another little bug. It's so hot today. I think I'm just going a bit crazy, speaking to myself alone in a very hot room. In our base manager, when we load our base, I forgot that, we are calling initialize here. We added this building save data. We just need to pass in the data back into that. So we're calling initialize, passing in our assigned scriptable object data to say which building it is, and then also we are passing in the save data associated with that. So if we now go back over to the game, we can see that we can get a long room, for example. Let's rotate it and place it there. We'll get a square room, place it down here. But maybe we'll do a bit of a corridor with rooms here like this, and we'll hit save, close the game, load the game, load base. So we've got our buildings here that we've just spawned in. Now let's delete those two and save our base. Go out of play mode, go back into play mode. We can load our base, and you see that the two that we've deleted have gone. We've still got our other one here, and then we could add in the observatory building piece over here. Save, quit, go back in, load our base, and we've got the observatory piece and our square piece. So that is everything. That's all working now. There was a few bugs towards the end that were driving me crazy, but one was a restart, and then we did a little bit more coding, and then it seems to be working now. If you do have any issues with that, make sure to join the Discord server, which is linked in the description below. Let me know there. You can let me know in the comments here, but it's easier to help you over on Discord. As always, the project files for this are available over on patreon.com/danposs if you do want to dig into the code and compare my code to your code. Thanks for coming along with me. on this little build tutorial series. I hope it was useful. I hope you learned a lot. Let me know what you want to see next on this channel in terms of tutorials. But for now, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one, whatever that may be. Bye. I'd just like to take a minute to thank my amazing patrons, without whom I would not be able to do these kind of long form sort of series. In the 10,000 XP tier, we have John Smart and Trey Briggs, and all of the wonderful 4,000 XP tier members are on screen now. Thanks again for your support.